All right, well, hello again, everybody. Have I reached the overexposure level yet? Yeah? No, I hope not. Well, my name is Dave Bullard, and I'll be moderating our panel today on energy infrastructure, security, reliability, and sustainability. And sustainability, like I said before, something we hear all the time. So my name is Dave Bullard. I've already got to talk to you a couple times. Just some quick background on me, like I said before, 10 years at Anheuser-Busch. The reason I'm moderating this panel is because I spent 10 years in non-nuclear generation at Ameren, and I'm really fascinated with what's going on with renewable energy and just the grid in general. So I spent 10 years not only doing capital planning, supporting projects, but looking at IRPs, so integrated resource planning. So this is really a fascinating topic for me, and I can't wait to hear what Sean and Gavin have to say. So more importantly now, Sean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Sean Hagan, president of the Institute of Global Energy Education. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, and was feeling young until Albert indicated he cut his teeth in '99, and I was going to use a phrase, I cut my teeth at Byron in '82. So anyway, I've got 40 years or so experience in just about all aspects of power generation, so sort of a power plant guy. I've got experience in nuclear, combined cycle natural gas, simple cycle or peaking plants, coal, alternative fuel, renewable wind, solar, PV, both on the design side as well as doing independent due diligence and consulting. Got a little bit of experience manufacturing egg cartons, but won't go into that too much. So happy to be here today to share some of that knowledge.
Thanks a lot. Gavin?
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Really excited to talk about this critical topic, no pun intended. My name is Gavin. I work for the City of Chicago. I am on the mayor's policy team, primarily working on equitable building decarbonization, looking at the intersection of environmental and climate justice, federal and local financing opportunities, and then really bold and ambitious policy and planning that we can do to meet the needs of this moment in the climate crisis. Really excited to get to work and jump into this conversation. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Gavin. Well, this topic is kind of like Smokey and the Bandit. You know, we got a lot of ground we can cover in a short time to do it. So let's get started here. I'm just gonna. Can you hear me without the microphone? Okay. What's that? You need the mic? Okay. All right. We'll try one more time. Okay.
You want to try this one?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Okay, Sean, I want to start with you. So it's no secret that renewable generation is top of mind globally. You know, we're starting to blur the lines between oil and gas companies, utilities. It's just energy. Okay, so you know we're seeing renewable generation not only to meet legacy demand, but for the ever increasing electrification transportation demand. So I think the impact on sustainability is clear. That's why we're doing it. But what I want to get from you is when you think about reliability, dispatchability, and affordability, what is the biggest misunderstanding you see as we pursue carbon-free energy?
Well, to me, the single biggest misunderstanding is that renewable energy equals carbon-free energy. And what I mean by that is utility-scale renewable wind and solar does inject, those utility-scale facilities inject carbon-free energy into the grid. However, that does not mean that the electricity coming out of the grid is carbon-free. And what I mean by that is that due to their intermittency, they have to have, or they rely upon, flexible generation to be balanced because the amount of electricity generated has to equal the amount of electricity demanded from the grid instantaneously. So the electrons that cause that light bulb to produce light right now, you know, just came out of the grid right now, a generator right now. And that's just the law of physics. So storage enters into it, but storage, you have to keep in mind, storage does not generate energy. So one of the outcomes of that is going to an extreme. If we were to go to 100% wind and solar grid, looking at the capacity factors of those two technologies, at most they'd be 0.4. So if you look at a day period, that would mean we'd have 40% of the time to operate those facilities to create 100% of the energy that we need. So you'd have to store 60% of the energy. So when you're looking at the cost of that, as well as the materials required to store that much energy, presents significant challenges. And there are solutions. I'm not here to say I'm anti-renewable or anything. It's just a lot of people are not aware of that, or are aware of it to varying degrees and what it means. And I'll just throw out one other quick item. So if we're talking about converting the cars, or all motor cars, to electric vehicles, doing a quick calc earlier while we were in an earlier presentation today, we'd have to generate 50% more energy, at least by 2019 numbers, this is the latest I had with me today. We'd have to generate 50% more energy than the grid is currently generating today in order to produce that much, to power those automobiles. Now, automobiles produce 80% of the carbon emissions, so it's a worthwhile goal. But given what I just said, if we take that power, the 50% increase from the grid, over 50% of that power is going to be from fossil fuels. And I'll just stop there.
Well, I'd like to stay on this subject for just another couple of minutes and ask you both the question, are we going too fast? Can we go too fast? And the reason I say that is, thinking about IRPs and long-range generation planning, you're seeing coal plants, for example, that have years, decades of life left in them being closed. And there's certainly, programs that are being done to mitigate the financial impact of that. But let me get your feedback. And Gavin, if you don't mind going first, can we go too fast? Are we going too fast? Should we go faster?
Oh, please. Here we go.
I would defer any technical questions to my esteemed colleague here. That is not necessarily my world, but I'd like to reframe the question, if possible, a little bit.
Please.
In Illinois, we have our Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, which has very specific generation requirements by specific dates. We have a 2030 net zero goal for generation. Whether or not that goal seems too fast to certain folks, we have a responsibility legally, but also a responsibility to the folks that are disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis to get the work done. So where people see technical problems and barriers that may appear technologically infeasible right now, I see massive opportunity that can be bridged by $370 billion in a federal climate plan that was just unveiled last night in a surprise. I see opportunity in the $188 million in climate financing that the city of Chicago has secured in general obligation bonds. And I say we use our incredible regional energy labs. We leverage the American spirit to overcome these incredible challenges, and we do it in the most equitable way possible. All that being said, aspirational as it is, the financing is there, the willpower is there. We have a legal and moral responsibility to do it, and I can talk a little bit more about the role that cities can play in leveraging their power to get this done. But we are past our due date for transitioning to a zero carbon economy. We have far surpassed what experts have said is the rational time by which we needed to decrease our emissions. To get there, we need rapid technological shifts, and it's going to take a lot of work. So I hope that we can merge the moral and legislative responsibility that's been laid out and with the kind of technology that exists right now and whatever we can deploy in the future to create that solution and get it done. So that's my perspective on it. And I know it's aspirational. I know we have a lot of technology folks here and a lot of folks who do the hard science, but I see a viable pathway, and other countries have done it, and I think we can too.
Well, there's nothing like a challenge to get people going. Sean, what do you think?
Couldn't agree more. Setting aspirational goals and working to achieve them, that's how you make progress. Our goal at the Global Energy Education is that those policies, the goals, are just anchored in sound engineering fundamental principles, so that when we go forward and implement those goals, we set those objectives and then we set the plans to achieve them, that they make sense and they're going to work as intended. That's the primary message I got. That I want to hopefully is the takeaway. It's not that absolutely the message is not that renewable energy is bad or wrong or anything of that nature. The question was what was misunderstood, so I was just trying to lay out the facts. So the point being, and Gavin, you teed it up pretty well, is let's take a holistic view of what is the impact of this. The grid is a single machine. All the power plants are different components of that single machine. They're all interdependent. So by having a mandate that says we want to have X% of a certain tool, and that's what a power plant is. It's defined by its operating characteristics, independent of its fuel. We're going to mandate a certain percentage of this type of operating characteristic, renewable energy, and that's going to achieve our goals. There's an implicit assumption in there that may not be correct, and it's cut out the engineering, as opposed to saying we're going to mandate X% carbon emission reduction or net zero or whatever, and then let the engineers and innovators achieve that the way that makes the most sense. And another misconception, perhaps, is that right now there is no body, no entity, an organization, or a single person that is accountable for grid reliability. So where there have been programs that have focused, whether it's moving too fast or not, I'm not saying that's the problem, but Germany that introduced an energy wind policy, and then California that has moved very, very quickly at putting in a focus on renewable energy, have both seen electricity prices go up and reliability decrease. And again, one reason for that, I can go through charts and graphs, and may get a question on that later, yeah. But not going through all the details now, there is a way to walk through to show why that's happening.
Well, hey, Sean, if I could just jump on something. You said a word a minute ago, machine, and I want to go to the other end of the vocabulary and talk about human behavior. Okay, and Gavin, I got a question for you. So we can talk about generation all day. We can talk about transmission to move renewable wind, renewable energy. We can talk about distribution. That's fine. What I want to talk about is the cheapest resource, which is energy efficiency. And when I see statistics like emissions equivalent of removing 400,000 cars from a road, that jumps off the page. And one of the big things I try to get out of InfraDay events is how do you manage change? So tell me, how from a change management, from an influence perspective, how did you accomplish that? You know, what best practices for human behavior change management do you have?
Yeah, do you mind if I? So this is definitely in my wheelhouse now. The generation side, I left to you. So I do focus on building decarbonization policy for the city, and this is really the critical component to meeting our 62% carbon reduction goal by 2040. 70% of the emissions in the city of Chicago are from our building stock. That is the statistic. It is the single largest portion of our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. That poses a massive opportunity, but an enormous challenge. The idea of electrifying and retrofitting buildings, passing laws and policy that can achieve that, and then leveraging financial tools, incentives, direct grants, different funding sources to actually get that done is an extremely complex endeavor. Here's what I'll say. The city of Chicago views itself as the organizer, the collaborator, and the person or the entity that delivers financial incentives to get this work done. To change people's minds and help folks understand the role that buildings play in our emissions reduction goals, we need to do several things. So primarily, we need to tell people why building decarbonization is so important. For the average family in Illinois right now, the price of natural gas is skyrocketing. There is massive instability. This is a result of global economic instability from the war in Ukraine, but it's also a result of local market conditions, inflation costs, and different pressures on the various corporations who do natural gas delivery in Illinois. We have that side of it. There's a whole public health component to burning fossil fuels in buildings to power your washing machine or your stove. We need to talk about that a little bit as well. So when you can create an agenda, provide financing opportunities, and do education events that show people that there is a triple bottom line advantage and incentive to do electrification and decarbonization, you can do that shifting of the mind, and you can do that kind of behavior change. But that is 10% of the battle. The 90% battle here, the share of that battle, is providing people the right financial incentives and the right credits to do the work. The city of Chicago, various entities have a limited opportunity to do meaningful retrofits. While it's important as a down payment, both conceptually, symbolically for the city, but also for our emissions, we need to give people the tools to do this for themselves. So for the average middle or low income person who may own a home or is renting a unit, how in the world are they going to afford a $7,000 mini split heat pump and the installation cost to do that, to help decarbonize their home? The answer is it's impossible. There's no way that these folks have $7,000 in upfront capital in order to do that. And that's just a tip of the iceberg. We're talking about EV charging. We're talking about buying electric vehicles. Now, all that being said, to change the way that people behave, to change the energy use and the emissions that we're using in buildings, the city has to use really creative concepts, leveraging those federal sources that we found. There's a $9 billion tax credit that's coming down the pipeline, fingers crossed, that will provide these tax credit incentives for folks to do this exciting electrification work. The city itself is investing $21 million in a low-income housing retrofit and electrification program, focusing specifically on our Department of Housing's housing stock and doing that. This is all part of providing financial incentives for the broader population, but then targeted incentives and financial measures in order to help the most disproportionately impacted and the least resilient communities, who happen to be the most disinvested communities in the city of Chicago, transition as quickly as possible. This is the meeting our carbon reduction goals. It's providing for environmental and climate justice for the folks who deserve it the most and who need it the most, and undoing systems of systemic oppression and providing reparative justice for people. And then on the third side, it's all about community health too. It's improving living conditions, ensuring that when there's an extreme weather event, your home doesn't lose power. The grid is not overwhelmed. You can do all this at once, but again, that whole picture I just painted is just a tiny piece of this puzzle, but it's again about the changing minds, providing the instruments to do the work and then meeting those ambitious goals.
Outstanding. Thank you. Now, Sean, I want to drill in a little bit and talk about people's behavior in their house, turning off lights, You know, I mean, we tend to look at people as becoming prosumers. You know, it used to be you were a consumer, now you're a prosumer. So, you know, you could be generating power someday. You could be putting power back on the grid with an EV. You could have solar panels, et cetera. And in the future, we see people as being energy managers, where they have to look at when's the best time to charge, when's the best time to do this, do that. So how to what extent do you think we can influence people's behavior about, you know, the thermometer, the thermostat set point in their house, when they charge their vehicles, how they leave lights on, things like that? How much do you think we can really influence that?
Well, this is going to be an opinion. I'm not a social expert on how people's behavior, so I'm just going to throw that out there.
Sure.
But I think, in my opinion, and sort of throwing a little bit of technology into there, I think one of the better approaches would be to start looking at mini distribution grids. Okay, and what I mean by that, using that phrase, would be take that 50% increase in energy for EVs, for example, and the fact if it comes from the grid that is going to contain fossil fuel, at least for the foreseeable future. However, if it's coming from, say, a distribution grid that's slightly more robust, not greatly more robust, but it's taking some of the federal dollars, and you apply it to a particular area, community or the suburb or what have you. Maybe it's tied into a DER, the distributed energy resource, so you have a centralized storage, and then it's also tied into all the car charging, the EVs that community has. So now you have a distributed energy storage system, and then you have solar panels in that community also. So you have ways to generate energy on the distribution grid. It's taking advantage of all the free energy of the solar as much as possible. It's going to act as a backup and and it's going to charge the cars at night. And when the cars, and let's assume that most of the cars are going to be utilized during the day for short trips, you know, in and around the community. Without people changing their behavior much, you've now have sort of a subsystem, if you will, that is sort of designed and in tune with people's current behavior. And all they have to do is be more aware of that. And if they tie in and utilize that more, then they're going to see the results in their power bill. And that's where I think that's going to be the fundamental driver for their behavior. But also, from getting back on the grid perspective, if you have sort of a distribution bus, if you will, but these mini grids that are all connected to each other, not necessarily going back out on the transmission grid, because you do not want to go and impact that machine networks, but having these distribution grids back each other up, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And what you'd end up doing is lowering overall demand, so you'd have less need for total number of power plants. You know, to me, something like that, you know, I think it has been studied. I haven't seen the specific studies, but certainly has a lot of merit, at least on a conceptual level, and it's something that people that can buy into. You know, it's going to generate savings to them. I think one of the challenges, though, is going to be sort of the equity side of it, the equitable distribution, because if you get into larger apartment buildings, you get into certain areas, are there going to be enough chargers, enough stations, enough, you know, there are other issues at hand. And just the only other comment is, again, from my perspective, it's a matter of making sure that there are options, technical options that work, and then get it to decision makers to overlay those other options, you know, those other considerations, knowing that whatever that objective is working to achieve, it's going to achieve its intended result. Does that help?
Oh yeah, yeah. So now I want to jump ahead and talk a little bit about a NERC report. So NERC just published its 2022 State of Reliability. So it was an assessment of 2021, and two key findings I want to point out. One is, as climate change increases extreme weather events intensity and frequency, 13 severe weather events again challenge the BPS or bulk power system grid resilience. Another key finding: geopolitical events, new vulnerabilities, new and changing technologies, and increasingly bold cyber criminals and hacktivists presented serious challenges. So I want to talk about resilience and security. And Gavin, I want to start with you. You've made some big strides to improve low-income housing climate resiliency. Can you share what some of those impacts have been?
Yeah, do you want me to tie it to the other part of the question as well, kind of the intersection between those two?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on a really, really important point from this, the last conversation about the concept of microgrids and kind of the micro approach to building resiliency for extreme weather. And I want to bring it back to a contextual example that some folks might be aware of here. In fact, I know some folks are. So in Bronzeville, we have the Bronzeville microgrid, this combination of a microgrid concept, battery storage on site to provide a backup in the case of climate-induced extreme weather, or just extreme weather, broadly that's being exacerbated by climate change. Now, this concept is a model for the future. It's ensuring that we have a diversity of generating resources, a diversity of storage, a smaller microgrid that is more resilient to both, acts of God, but also, folks who have nefarious intentions to do, cyber terrorism, and that is the future, I think, in many ways. The idea of doing distributed generation combined with storage with microgrids, and ensuring that the benefits are equitably distributed through, tax credits, direct grants, things like that. That's the move. That's the way that we are advancing the renewable energy transition and making it just. So kind of bringing it back to the Chicago housing context, in our office and on our sustainability team, we view all housing, as this like large scale infrastructure project. So while the individual home, folks may think is not an infrastructure asset necessarily, connected, it's one of the largest assets we have. It's not, the highway system, it's not the sewer system, but again, 70% of our emissions, come from the built environment that we have. And for our low-income housing specifically, where the barriers to entry for generating renewable energy, improving energy efficiency on site, and ensuring the safety of the residents, where that kind of package of problems is kind of the most wicked of them all. The way to overcome it is by using the multi-pronged, all of government approach. It requires this really, really complex coordination between our Department of Planning, our Department of Housing, our sustainability team. We have to work with HUD, we have to work with the Chicago Housing Authority, all these factors coming together to ensure that we have really the proper incentives, but also the most efficient work stream set up between all these overlapping entities to do the work. And then on top of all of that is the development of a diverse and highly effective green workforce who can do this really exciting work. Now, the city of Chicago is deeply invested in all of that, the intergovernmental coordination, working with the private sector to get this diverse contractor base built in order to do this really exciting work. I mentioned before we have this $21 million fund for our low and median income housing retrofit and electrification work. We are advancing that now. The planning for that is happening. This concept is a down payment on climate action from the perspective and using the lens of equitable allocation of benefits. And again, this is that triple bottom line thing that I keep coming back to. We have policy at the city level, financial resources, and the desire to do good. And when you look at the social community health benefits of doing electrification and resiliency work, the money that can be saved when you are sealing an envelope and converting and fine-tuning, old appliances, and then of course the carbon emissions benefits that you can achieve through all of this, combining that all into a package and giving the private sector the model for how to get it done and how to work with the city to get it done. That's the recipe for success. So we have this $188 million in geo bonds the city has secured to do a lot of this recovery plan work related to climate. All of it's meeting our climate action plan goals. It's truly rooted in providing the most equitable benefits for the folks that are disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis here in the city. So the work is ongoing. Again, complex, requires tons of intergovernmental and interagency coordination. We're working out a lot of the difficulties now, hoping that we can set up these models for the future so that we can really deliver the just transition and the most efficient and equitable decarbonization pathway possible to meet our goals.
Outstanding. Well, it sounds like you're not taking a victim role where this has to be a cost burden, this has to be painful. It sounds like you're looking for ways to say we can do this, and by the way, we can save money. So that's great. Let me turn back to you, Sean, on the cyber part. So for 10 years at Ameren at the utility where I used to work, I heard employees are our biggest risk from a cybersecurity perspective. How do you respond to that? Are our employees at a utility the biggest power plant? I mean, the biggest cybersecurity risk, and what else could we be doing in the cyberspace?
I don't know.
Thank you very much. All right.
No, I just wanted to answer the question.
Okay.
But I will make a few comments about cybersecurity and going in with electrification using renewable solar and wind. One of the key characteristics they have in power generation is they have to go from converting their power they generate from DC to AC, and they use this type of equipment called inverters. And so essentially they go through an electronic means to provide what's called ancillary services for the grid. But essentially, the way to think about it is the grid needs to be kept stable. So in other words, wherever you are in the grid, when you pull electricity out of it, you want to make sure it stays at a very tight bounding range of voltage and frequency. So wherever you plug into it, it's going to be 120 volts and 60 hertz. And it's not going to vary from that. It's not, what is it? I'm going to date myself again, but it's not 110, 111, whatever it takes, from Mr. Mom.
Mr. Mom, another good Michael Keaton. There you
go.
Yeah,
so, all right, yeah, thanks. You're old too. So anyway, it's a very tight band. That's typically kept in check now or controlled by the inertia produced by every generator on the grid that's in sync with every other generator on the grid. So you have this massive amount of inertia, if you will, that's built up that's now in sync. So now if you go in, the more wind and solar DC generation that you put into the grid as a generation asset, you go through these inverters, and they don't have this massive amount of inertia behind them. So it's an electronic conversion process, and so when we initially talked about this question, it's the first thing that popped into my head was, if I wanted to make the grid that much more unreliable or try to bring it down, that would be where I'd be looking at. Mm-hmm. But I'm just thinking nefariously. I don't have the skill set, and I don't know what the protection schemes are. NERC takes those things very seriously.
Yes, they do.
So I would like to think smarter people than me are approaching it and looking at it from that perspective. But that is a new area, a new type of threat that doesn't exist with the type of grid that stability is provided mainly by the type of power plants that are prevalent now.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Looks like we're all out of time. I've really enjoyed getting to interact with you before today and getting to be up on stage with you. So thank you very much.
Likewise.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.